you have a question?
Yeah, it's much better. You touched on before, you don't see many four-year college athletes who then make it as a pro. Yourself, Isner, Todd Martin back in the day, having made that thing. What is the gap that you can expand on as you see between the collegiate level and the pro level? That really kind of, I think, humbles a lot of players, especially some of the top players coming out of college who take a stab at the pros and don't see much success and go below the net.
So the gap in terms of how the game is played?
Yeah, the collegiate to the pro level.
Well, so I'll go back to 1977. What was Mac's freshman year at Stanford? Was it 77. So in June of 1977, John McEnroe was a senior in May he was a senior in high school. He probably graduated. And then in July, actually, he went to Wimbledon as an 18-year-old and made the semis of Wimbledon. Not the semis of junior Wimbledon, the semis of Wimbledon. And 3 months later, he was 30 in the world probably. 3 months later, he enrolled at Stanford. And I think Coach said, Mac, great, thrilled that you're here. I don't care if I don't see you till January. But anyway, at the time, I think he probably passed on collecting $4,000 or $5,000 for making the semis of Wimbledon. That's why he maintained his amateur status and enrolled at Stanford. Today, if someone does that, makes the semis of Wimbledon, to still enroll at Stanford, you're passing on $500,000 in prize money, and for sure, probably 7 figures in endorsements. So it's just not practical. I wouldn't begrudge anybody to have that kind of result and decide not to go to college. So, first answer to your question, I think a lot of our top talent are not spending time in school, and so there's just better players going on tour earlier. Which, who's going to begrudge Andy Roddick for the decision he made at 18 to go on tour? I think we would all agree that that was the right decision for Andy. There might be 10 to 12 guys who made that decision that didn't work out as well and would have benefited from a couple of years in school. And I think one of the reasons it's very hard is mentally it's really hard to make that adjustment. I mean, when you're in college, when you're in juniors, if you're good, you're winning a lot of tournaments. I mean, I think my worst year in school, I was like 24-6 or something, lost 6 matches. Well, it only took 6 weeks on tour before I had 6 losses on my belt. And so to be able to sort of handle the emotional rigors, ups and downs of the tour is difficult. And it's a lot easier to do, I think, at 22, having gone to school and matured a little bit, than it is at 18. So a lot of these 18-year-olds who are very talented but don't realize success right away on tour, their careers get stopped before they ever have a chance to get started, just from a mental aspect.
We'll do one more question. I know it's getting warm in here.
I'm going to give one more
Oh,
example,
sorry.
because I don't know that I directly answered your question. I can tell you from a personal experience, when I was in school, I had mentioned earlier that I felt like I got away with certain things in college I just couldn't on tour. And so, for example, there were times where I felt like I would come to the net to put pressure on a guy just for the sake of putting pressure on a guy, and just because I had Stanford on my chest, and just because Coach had, built the program that he had built, well, that guy missed the passing shot. Whereas in tour, I didn't have Stanford on my chest anymore. Guy said, "Thank you very much. You shouldn't be coming in on that." So that is an example of the type of adjustments I felt like I had to make when I was making the transition from college to the tour. And I think in general, like I said, it's such a more physical game. I mean, on tour, you're eating dorm food and grinding and sleeping maybe 6 hours a night and have a social life, and you're conditioning-wise, it's not the same ball game as doing what Djokovic and Nadal did in Australia. So that's another sort of significant adjustment I think you got to make.
Kathy?
Yeah, don't you think that USTA is finding talented kids sooner than they have in the past? And with the 10 and under, the soccer balls, they're enjoying the sport more than I think a 5-year-old
We could ask these
that
guys.
uses the regular rackets. But
So
I
I
know
would-
locally there's a lot of kids that have talent, getting to tournaments across the country and stuff.
Absolutely, and so
Sooner.
what the young Kathy is referring to is this initiative that the USDA has really sponsored in the last, 3-4 years, this 10 and Under initiative, Quick Start, which is starting younger kids with smaller equipment that's more suitable for them, softer balls, and I really like that initiative. I think one part of your statement that I would challenge you on or push back on you on is I don't think it's necessarily or exclusively the USTA's responsibility to identify the 5, 6, 7-year-old, whatever, right? The 10 initiative is fantastic, but it really has to be done at the local level, I think, to be identifying the folks and helping them develop at an early age is really where it has to get
I think the
started.
money comes into play. If USTA doesn't get involved with those families of kids, that they might not economically be able to have the.
Certainly there are opportunities, there
Yeah,
are.
they don't get a coach.
Absolutely, there are examples
every week,
where
3 times a
some
week.
families that
Yeah.
could use the support
Right.
need it, and in that case, if the USDA
Yeah.
can step in, or if the local section can step in, that, EPAT I think is a great example of what Coach is doing.
Right.
We need to be able to support those kids. We need. I'd love to see our best athletes starting tennis and sticking with it. But it's not necessarily just at the national level where that has to be done. It really, I think, especially at a younger age, it has to start at the local level. And we have to empower the local coaches with the resources to enable them to do that.
Is anybody, are you guys friendly with each other when you're on the pro tour? Do you guys go out and have a beer or something to eat, or is it just the top 10 players that wouldn't dare try to be friendly? Or?
No, absolutely. I think, particularly this generation, I think you see it in all sports really, but certainly the Americans hang out with the Americans a little bit more, but absolutely you're grabbing meals every night, you're playing cards every night. It's a competitive life, it's a competitive job, but it's a really lonely one if you choose to be so competitive that you can't get along with your colleagues off the court. Like, go out and don't give an inch in between the lines, but do it in such a way we talked about earlier, where you're sharing a meal afterwards and there's mutual respect. And because if you're just hanging by yourself, it's too lonely of an existence. So I think more so now than ever, and I think you see it in the other sports as well. I mean, basketball, these guys are before the game, are patting each other on giving bro hugs and patting each other on the back. And I hear a lot of from all sports, I hear a lot of the older the retired players saying things like, guys are too friendly with each other. I liked it when they were a little bit more competitive with each other. So I think today, I think guys get along really well with each other. But I would be surprised, and I don't know as well, but I would be surprised if you had seen John McEnroe and Jimmy Connors going out to dinner all that often. Coach? No, he doesn't know, okay.
No comment.
But I find it hard to believe that Nadal or Federer or Djokovic, for instance,
I
are
don't know
not
if
just saying hello and then going off with their entourage.
I think Roger and Rafa genuinely sort of like each other. Actually, in the last couple years, they've split on some of the issues on the tour, some of the sort of how the tour is managed issues, and so they're perhaps not quite as friendly. And at the very high level, Jiminy, there's so much pressure there. It's hard for me to relate to. But yeah, I don't know that Roger and Rafa are going out to dinner all that often. But for a while they were, and I think they really do sort of. The last couple of years, I think the relationship has struggled a little bit. But I just can't imagine. Andre and Pete, for example, they may have been at dinner together, but it was begrudgingly.
Some of it's just personality.
Some of his personality. But I think this generation is a little bit. I don't know, those Aussies back in the day were super friendly. I think they were going out and not having a beer or two every night, but probably more like 6 or 7. Laver and Emerson, those guys. That's just the sort of the Aussie way. I think those guys were pretty friendly with each other. So yeah, a little bit on personality.
So are you doing any coaching at all? With little
Yeah, a
kids?
little bit. I don't know if you call it coaching, just helping out a little bit before and after work.
Oh.
With some youth.
What age range?
10 to 18. 14, 12, 18, I don't know.
Where do you live right now?
San Francisco.
Any other questions? All right, Paul, it was so nice of you to
Yeah.
come. I really.
Thanks for having me.
It really means a lot for us to hear your perspective, and again, I want to thank each and every one of you for coming out. And thanks to all the Zoom clients, Edwin, Judy, Michael, Kanchan. Let's see if I missed anybody. Pam is practically a client. And Wynn. Thanks so much for your support, and let's go cheer for the Cardinal and singles.
Victor, Ellie